Okay, it's just happened that Washington Post ended up writing a report on how South Korea recycles 98% of its food waste. That's massive, right? Almost all of it. What can it teach the world? Almost all leftovers from homes and restaurants are turned into compost, animal feed, and even energy. But its model isn't easy to replicate. Right? This is the problem because solutions are not always transferable. Here is something that I forgot to include the caption. Let me do that right now. The problem is, let's say South Korea is a rich country, it's a small country, it's a homogeneous country, and it has lots of resources to focus on a particular problem like this. Can every country do this? Not necessarily, especially if you got many other priorities, then it can become tricky. So let's read the report. This is not a scientific report in the sense of a peer-reviewed publication, but these journals, newspapers these days do an excellent job of doing their research, as we saw from the other report from Somini Sengupta from New York Times. The caption here is "Food waste is sorted and shredded." June 21 to be. Oops, sorry, I June 21 to be turned out in, yeah, so obviously the caption is a bit screwed up, but food waste is sorted and shredded to be turned into biogas, a type of renewable energy, at the Daejeon Bioenergy in South Korea. So you can see it looks pretty scary, but this is what is involved in recycling food waste. So this is the Washington Post, August 9, 2024, just a couple of days ago. Starting at 5 a.m. each day, dozens of trucks bring more than 400 tons of stinky, sticky food waste from restaurants and homes to a facility the size of 2 football fields, which transforms it into into enough green energy to power about 20,000 households. The Daejeon Bioenergy Center is one of about 300 facilities that enable South Korea to recycle nearly all of its 15,000 tons of food waste, of daily food waste, which can be composted into fertilizer, fed into livestock, or turned into biogas, a kind of renewable energy in the sense you are not producing new carbon to do this, you are using existing carbon. This place takes care of half of the entire daily food waste that the city of Daejeon produces, said Jong-gu Hwang, the plant's chief executive, referring to a city of 1.5 million, about 2 hours outside of Seoul. Newspaper reports tend to have this human touch, but they have a lot of good information, so I'm going to go through it. Without it, most of the scraps would have gone into the ground, polluting the soil and generating methane, a greenhouse gas that is far worse than carbon dioxide in terms of global warming in the short term. So methane lasts for about a decade, whereas CO2 can last for centuries, and methane is about 25 times more powerful in terms of trapping outgoing thermal energy. So that's global warming potential. When South Korea started tackling this problem 20 years ago, it threw away 98% of its food waste. Today, 98% of food waste is turned into feed, compost, and or energy. According to the South Korean Ministry of Environment, it achieved this by banning food scraps from landfills and mandating that all residents separate their food waste from their trash and recycling, and to pay for the service through fees and fines. Okay, here is a nice figure. There are some. This may be a video. Let's see. Oops. South Koreans recycle nearly all of their food waste by composting it into fertilizer, feeding it to livestock, or turning it into biogas. Here is how they do it. So this is PPT is very smart, but somehow it is, yeah, here we go. Can I do it from here? No, yeah, there it goes. So South Korea recycles 98% of its food waste. I have not turned on the sound, or maybe you cannot hear it, but anyway, You get the idea. So, South Korea is one of the few countries with a nationwide system for food waste management, while France made composting food mandatory this year, and some cities like New York have imposed similar rules. Few places match up with South Korea. In the United States, 60% of food waste goes to landfills, according to a 2019 environmental EPA estimate, with only 5% composted and 15% turned into energy. Quick comparison from EPA. You can how South Korea compares with the US in food recycling. Percentage of food waste that gets recycled or composted is about 40% in the US, and it's 98%. But you can also compare generally food waste per capita. Data is a few years behind as usual. 2019 amount of food wasted per capita measured in kilograms. These are just the top countries. Every country is in it now. So at the retail outlets, out of home consumption, and household. So you can see US leads at 139 kilogram per capita. I think this is per year. And China comes in at the second place. Indonesia, which is not even a rich country, seems to waste a lot. World on average is 120 kilograms. Brazil, South Africa, and Russia. Okay, so this is obviously a global problem. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization says up to 31% of all food gets wasted, which is enough to feed more than 1 billion hungry people. There is a link here that you can click on. Food waste is estimated to cause 6 to 8% of global emissions, which I have discussed elsewhere. It's one of the biggest and dumbest environmental problems we have today, said Jonathan Foley, Executive Director of the Project Drawdown, a non-profit that evaluates climate solutions. I have a section on Drawdown on my channel with many sections on how actually drawing down CO2 works in terms of potential of reduction by 2050 and costs and benefits and so on. A typical person creates about 265 pounds or 120 kilograms of food leftovers every year, according to the UN tallies analyzed by our World in Data, which I already showed. A single American produces 304 pounds compared to 242 pounds for a South Korean. Malaysians top the chart with 573 pounds, while Slovenians produce a world low of 134 pounds. That's a low. You know, it's relative, but still 134 pounds per year. So idea is not to waste and then recycle it efficiently. The idea would be to not waste at all, as we'll see at the end. Around 400 tons of food waste is unloaded daily at the Daejeon Bioenergy in South Korea. So that's image that also is a video that I wasn't allowed to download. It's important to filter out non-compostable items like plastic bags, disposable cutlery, and bones from the collected food waste. So they do it. What are the ingrained habits? When they were first implemented, South Korea's food waste policies were met with pushback from a public being forced to pay fines and fees for their dinner leftovers. But now the country's 50 million people consider food recycling a part of daily life. This is called a meme. You know, things propagate by genetic inheritance, but cultural memes propagate via practices, and this one started because of the fear of fines and fees, but now becomes a natural part of life. Some Seoul high-rises have electric waste bins that weigh food waste, and residents who log their waste via a digital record are charged by month according to how much they throw out. Others buy government compost bags for as little as 10 cents and dispose of them in street-side bins. Violators who mix their food into regular trash may be fined. Lee Jeong, a 35, I don't know how to say it, Jae-young maybe, Lee Jae-young, a 35-year-old who lives near Seoul and uses the government food trash bag, says throwing out leftovers separately has become just like another household chore. I get small sense of fulfillment knowing I'm contributing to lowering carbon emissions, he said. So peer pressure, memes, excellent. Recycling practices also need to adapt to Korean customs. For example, Banchan, or the multiple side dishes served with a typical Korean meal that are often leftover, half eaten at restaurants. So typically you have kimchi and some vegetables and some other little meat and so on. So you get a big array of side dishes. And here is Ryu collecting leftovers in a colander and squeezing out water to lower the collection cost because it's by weight. She then dumps the scraps into a prepaid food trash bag that you can buy. Yun Jung Ryu, the owner of Dandelion Bapjip on an all-you-can-eat diner in Seoul, offers around 10 banchan as part of a meal that costs 7,000 won, or about $5. So you have to buy it separately instead of getting it free, because if you pay for it, maybe you don't waste so much of it. She's tried numerous ways to reduce food waste, and therefore the fee she pays for disposal. She squeezes liquid out of the scraps before recycling and also reminds her customers of the environmental and economic impact of wasted food. There's even a banner that notes a small fee for customers who leave leftovers on their plates. South Koreans adopted this way of life out of necessity, according to Park Jong-am, the recycling team leader at the Korea Federation for Environmental Movements, an activist group. Plans to dispose of food waste failed in the 1990s when residents complained of smelly landfills and neighborhoods did not want to host incinerators. There is a worship of some kind going. Somebody's blowing a conch shell. South Korea's population density, more than 51.7 million people living in an area roughly the size of Indiana, it's a very dense, small country, made it impossible to build facilities far from residential areas. So the only option remaining was recycling. So you can see how they came to this. But despite all its success in recycling, the government still has not persuaded citizens to waste less food. The amount of food waste being created, about 5.5 million tons per year, has not changed much over 5 years, despite the cost and hassle of residents having to recycle it. So we just read that people are collecting the waste and recycling it, but they are not reducing the waste. This works this way because when you put a cost on it, people initially complain, then they become less careful, saying anyway I'll pay for it, so they may just waste more even. That's the moral hazard. A customer grills beef at a restaurant in Seoul on March 8th. Korean restaurants usually throw out unfinished banchan or side dishes in Korean cuisine. You can see lots of them on the side. Nice kimchi here. I love kimchi. What are the challenges still ahead? The country also hasn't completely figured out how to best use those scraps. Sorting food waste is tricky. In the South Korean system, eggs, chicken and onions can be composted, but their shells, bones and roots cannot. Disposable cutlery or even dog poop sometimes makes it into food waste bins. If too many of the wrong scraps arrive at the recycling facilities, they can create mechanical breakdowns that may require up to a year of repairs. Farmers are not eager to give their livestock feed made from food waste, so they don't like feeding their cattle waste, and are reluctant to sow crops in soil tilled with fertilizer made from garbage due to the smell and excess sodium. So you can see the downstream problems of getting rid of the recycled food waste. There's been cases of livestock getting killed from the feed. It's also impossible to ensure. Not a single toothpick, piece of plastic or metal doesn't get mixed in with the food waste that gets turned into feed or fertilizer. Actually, it should say it's also impossible to make sure they don't get mixed. Yeah, that's why South Korea is increasingly relying on biogas centers like the one in Daejeon, Jeongse's. They reduce pollution and emissions, lessen the pressure on ever-dwindling space for landfills, and generate electricity and heating. Here are the workers workers monitoring the status of machinery at the Daejeon Bioenergy Center in Daejeon on June 21st. Silos collect gases from decomposing food waste at the Daejeon Bioenergy on June 21st. The downside is that they are less efficient in the hotter months due to lower demand for heating. Last year, a Vietnamese delegation visiting Daejeon Bioenergy Center went home empty-handed because they learned that a biogas facility would not make financial sense in Vietnam's hotter climate. This is the same thing that was being discussed at Stanford a few weeks ago when I was there, and a Korean researcher who was there said actually his approach works better in hotter temperatures because he's using some microbes to do some bioengineering to do the composting. So maybe some solution will come out for this. Jonathan Krohns, an associate professor of engineering at Brandeis University, said the South Korean system is probably not adaptable to the United States. The reality is that the low cost of land and relatively low population density, leading to high transportation costs, makes any national scale waste standards really hard to imagine. In other words, US has plenty of land for landfills and you can put them far away from people, so nobody cares about the stink and methane can keep coming out. Ultimately, the best way to mitigate the entire problem is simply putting less on your plate to begin with. According to Krohns, that's where the real benefits are, he said. So the entire world is wasting food and we need to reduce this waste. And recycling will not go away because we will always waste some. There are irreducible wastes like at restaurants. As middle class explodes in China and India, for example, people eat out more or they order in more and they tend to waste more. So how do you reduce waste in the first place is a tricky business, but in the meantime the recycling has to keep getting better and also work in all temperatures, not just in cooler temperatures. Okay, so this is a nice addition to what we've been discussing from the World Wildlife Federation report. I will leave it here.